Making a difference. Millionaire discovers black cleaner's incredible secret in darkness. You won't believe what happens next. Frank Donovan strolled through his sleek office on the 38th floor. The city sprawled beneath him like a glittering jewel. He was a self-made millionaire, the kind of man who commanded respect, a life filled with luxury, fast cars, and fancy suits. But as he looked out the window, a deep emptiness gnawed at him. His wealth felt like a mask, hiding the profound loneliness beneath. Success, he had learned, was a hollow achievement when it left him standing alone at the top of his corporate empire. It was during one of those late nights in the office when he stumbled upon Clara Jenkins. The soft hum of a vacuum cleaner broke the silence of the otherwise empty rooms. He peered through a crack in the door and was captivated by her spirit. Clara, a resilient black cleaner, moved with a quiet determination that radiated strength. Despite the shadows cast by her hard life, 3 jobs, an ailing mother, and young children, she worked tirelessly, her face lit by a flickering lamp as she diligently studied for her social work degree. The sight struck Frank like a lightning bolt. Her rise against adversity mirrored the struggles he had forgotten. Shame washed over him as he watched her. Here was a woman, fighting for her future in the dim light of her reality, while he wallowed in his obscured world of luxury. Each line in her textbooks told a story, one of hope, trial, and perseverance. Clara was more than the help. She embodied a life rich with purpose, humility, and an unwavering desire for change. He felt an ache in his chest, a stirring deep within that pushed him to confront his privilege. Frank finally mustered the courage to approach her, but skepticism brewed in Clara's eyes, hardened by years of disappointment. "What do you want?" she snapped, wary of the man who reeked of entitlement. Yet, as time passed, their worlds began to collide in unexpected ways. A community crisis struck, unemployment soared, families faced despair, poverty gnawed at their heartstrings. Frank watched the chaos unfold from his lofty office, a world he had insulated himself from until now. The fear pressed in around him, whispering reminders of how fragile their lives had become. Suddenly, he found himself drawn into Clara's fight. Bright-eyed and passionate, she organized a community rally, her voice rising above the fear and uncertainty. But as he prepared to stand by her side, his phone buzzed with messages from friends, the same friends who whispered about the dangers of associating with the help. A war raged within him, part of him longing to help, yet the other held him back, scared to break free from the rigid expectations laid before him. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he faced the rally, Clara caught his eye, and in that fleeting moment, a silent understanding kindled between them. Fear, courage, hope, it all swirled like autumn leaves dancing in the wind. The question hung heavy in the air. Would he step into the light for the sake of change, or retreat to the safety of shadows? The answer loomed just beyond his reach, waiting to push him toward a life enriched with purpose, connection, and the chance to make a true difference in a divided world. The rally buzzed with energy, the air thick with anticipation. Clara stood confidently at the front, her voice a beacon cutting through the noise. "This is our moment," she yelled, her words igniting a fire among the crowd. Frank felt his heart thumping loudly in his chest. He had made a decision, one that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. That he stepped forward, joining her at the front, the murmurs of disbelief rippling through the crowd like a wave. "Who is that guy?" someone whispered. "Doesn't he live in a penthouse?" It stung, but Frank pushed the doubt away. He could no longer remain a bystander. The stakes were too high, and Clara needed him as much as he needed her. When Clara smiled at him, it felt like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "You came," she breathed, her eyes reflecting surprise and hope. "I didn't think you would. I can't stay on the sidelines anymore," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do this together." He could see the spark of determination in her gaze. For the first time, he felt he was part of something real, something important. Clara began sharing stories of families struggling to make ends meet, of children unable to afford school supplies, of parents scared to open their mail for fear of eviction. Each story was a thread woven into a bigger tapestry of struggle, weaving tighter around Frank's heart. He knew he had the resources to help, but how? As the tears fell from some faces in the crowd, he felt the urgency to act. He raised his hand, the gesture silencing the crowd. "We need to build a community fund," he announced, his voice strong. "Together, we can help each other." The air buzzed with shock and growing excitement. "But where will the funds come from?" A voice shouted from the back. Doubt danced in the air again, threatening to drown out the spark of hope. "I will fund it," Frank replied boldly, every word lifting Clara's spirit. "I want to be part of this. I want my success to mean something." Gasps echoed through the crowd, disbelief and gratitude washing over Clara's features. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and joy. "Yes," he affirmed, his heart racing as he looked around at the hopeful faces staring back at him. "I want to be here, and I want to help." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time, Frank felt worthy of their admiration. As the rally continued, ideas flew and proposals blossomed. Frank felt dizzy with the momentum. It was euphoric. But lurking in the shadows was doubt. What if his friends were right? What if investing in the community marked him as a failure among his peers? Clara caught his hesitation. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, and he nodded, though his heart raced. "I just can't shake the fear of backlash," he admitted, looking into her steadfast eyes that softened with understanding. "And what if it's worth it?" she replied, her voice fierce yet gentle. "What if this changes everything? For both of us?" In that moment, Frank realized he was no longer just a millionaire in a tower. He was a man with a decision to make, a choice not just about wealth, but about legacy and purpose. Suddenly, someone from the crowd shouted, "When do we start?" Frank glanced at Clara, the flames of resolve sparking between them. "Right now," he exclaimed, feeling the stirring within him to step further into the light. But as he turned to the crowd, he caught a glimpse of a figure watching from a distance, someone he recognized yet couldn't quite place. A shiver ran down his spine. What were they doing here? As he stood on the cusp of a new chapter, Frank felt the weight of change pressing against his chest. Would this leap of faith bring him closer to Clara and his community, or would it pull him into uncharted darkness? The moment was electric. Frank's pulse raced as he searched the crowd, locking eyes with the figure that had caught his eye. It was an old acquaintance, Keith, once a business rival, now someone who seemed to exude a powerful mix of curiosity and disdain. Why was he here? Was this a joke at his expense? Clara's voice cut through his thoughts. "Frank, focus on them," she urged, gesturing toward the crowd, still buzzing with excitement. He nodded, but his mind lingered on Keith, his presence curling around his chest like a vine, squeezing tight. "Together, let us pool our resources," Frank shouted, trying to anchor himself to the present. "Let us create a future for our kids, for families who are struggling." The crowd responded, cheers swelling and washing over him like a wave. Yet Keith stood still, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Frank's heart twisted. Was this the man who would dare undermine him at such a pivotal moment? He swallowed hard and pushed the thought down. This was not the time for distractions. Let us get those ideas flowing. Clara encouraged the crowd, her enthusiasm infectious. "What can we do together?" Hands shot up, voices chiming in. "Workshops, food drives, scholarships." Frank felt his heart pumping louder as he began weaving together their ideas into a coherent plan. They could transform their community. Just imagine families getting support, children thriving in school. With each suggestion, the outlined vision grew brighter and more vivid, something he could almost touch. But amidst the excitement, doubt pricked at him. Frank was venturing into a world he had long avoided, one that was raw and unfiltered, away from glitzy parties and polished gatherings. This was real life. Would he thrive here or drown? Clara caught his eye again. "Are you with me?" she asked, her voice soft yet powerful, demanding an answer. "Absolutely," he replied, his heart steadying. The weight of her gaze anchored him, pulling him into this vibrant moment. The crowd started chanting, "Together! Together!" Momentum swelled around them. Frank's doubt began to fade as he felt this connection, this bond they were all forging. And then, Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Keith stepping forward, drawing closer. The light faded from Frank's face. Was this a moment of reckoning? He felt as if a spotlight was shining just on him, illuminating everything he'd been avoiding. "Frank," Keith called, his voice cutting through the noise. "You really think you can just sway the crowd and change everything overnight?" The crowd quieted, eyes darting between the two men. Clara's expression shifted, from enthusiasm to concern. "Maybe I can," Frank shot back, adrenaline coursing through him. "Maybe we all can. But you wouldn't understand, would you?" The air thickened as silence enveloped them. For a brief moment, Frank was unsure if he'd lost his composure. But then Clara touched his arm, squeezing lightly. That simple gesture rekindled his spirit. "Frank believes in the people," Clara shouted, drawing attention back to the heart of the rally. "And that essay start. One belief can spark a revolution." The crowd erupted again, cheers lifting them all higher. For the first time, Frank felt resolute, ready to embrace the tumult of change, even if it meant confronting the past. But just when the energy was at its peak, something behind him made his skin crawl. A murmur of whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "What now?" Frank wondered. Turning cautiously, he caught sight of a group forming near the edge of the crowd. Their eyes fixed on him, some familiar faces, but others he didn't recognize. Their expressions frightened him. Were they allies or enemies? He took a breath, adrenaline rushing in. Would he stand tall, rise for clarity, or would he falter? Did he even know what awaited him? Everything around him felt charged, and it was only the beginning. "Change is coming," Clara declared, raising her arms high. Her spirit was unyielding. But was he truly ready for that shift? And what exactly lay in the hearts of those newfound watchers? With the air thick with uncertainty, Frank knew he needed to decide: embrace this tumultuous beginning or retreat back to his old life that felt increasingly threadbare. He glanced at Clara, who was already staring expectantly at him, and he realized the answer could redefine not just their future, but the fate of their entire community. What was he willing to face for a better tomorrow? The murmurs intensified, slicing through the air like a sudden storm. Frank scanned the crowd for clues, his heart plummeting as he recognized one or two faces from wronged business dealings. They had every reason to be wary of him. Perhaps the rally's momentum had drawn in allies and adversaries alike, all grappling with the same questions. Clara continued to rally the audience, her voice full of passion. "Change doesn't come from comfort, my friends. It comes from each of us stepping forward, opening our hearts, and sharing our strengths." But Frank couldn't shake the knot of dread tightening in his stomach. The whispers were growing louder, a cacophony full of suspicion. He focused on Clara, allowing her encouraging smile to anchor him. "Stay in the moment," he told himself, forcing a smile in return. "Let us hear what you have to say," Clara announced, pointing toward the fringe of the crowd. "Everyone has a voice. They matter." A man stepped forward, his face shadowed but eyes bright with conviction. "What if your plans are just smoke and mirrors, Frank? What gives you the right to lead us again? You left us high and dry before." Frank felt the sting of those words hit home. He had retreated to his bubble of success for too long while others struggled. "All I can do is prove myself to you, and I will," he shouted back, his confidence wavering but determined. "I'm here to serve, to listen, and to support. I've seen the struggles, and I want to change that. But how can we trust you?" A woman chimed in, her voice shaky yet firm. "What's in it for you? You have wealth, a name, and we have nothing." Frustration bubbled inside him. The primal urge to defend himself surged up. He could easily point out the community's flaws, the endless cycle of neglect, but that wouldn't win anyone over. Instead, he felt his mind searching for honesty, for connection. "Okay," he paused, letting their icy stares pierce him. "I admit, I'm not the guy you want me to be. I've been lost in my own world. But I now see how important it is to act together. I need your guidance. I want to be part of the change without bringing the weight of my past." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Frank caught Clara's gaze, and for a moment, he felt the warmth of her support. But would it hold against a storm of doubt and anger? The original man pressed further, eyes narrowing. "Everyone's seen your type before, Frank. Big promises, empty words. So, let us make it real. What are you really willing to do?" Frank hesitated, unsure how to turn this around. "I'm willing to meet you where you are. Let us hold workshops, community forums. I pledge to put a portion of my resources toward initiatives that matter. Let this be my rebirth, not as a businessman, but as a community member. The crowd's energy shifted, their expressions softening a fraction. Was it enough to quench the doubts? He needed to dig deeper, to draw them in. I want to create a place where we can come together, where your stories are heard loud and clear. A community center, resources for families, opportunities. He proposed, feeling his pulse quicken. I can't transform everything overnight, but I'll start with you, not against you. Sudden applause broke through, carrying a wave of hope around the gathering. Just as he thought he was gaining ground, the group of unfamiliar faces edged closer. Their energy was palpable doubt mixed with something darker. They stepped into the light. Frank squinted, recognizing one of them as a former competitor who had shunned him. The look in the man's eyes held a bitterness that twisted in Frank's gut. "What are you doing here, James?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Funny you ask," James replied, a sly smile creeping across his lips. "I just came to see how the mighty Frank handles the pressure of his past. It seems you've gathered quite the audience of the broken." Frank felt the freeze of fear take hold, but refused to let it show. "Don't you dare think you can intimidate anyone here. We're building something different," he shouted, feeling the urgency lift up his spirit. Yet inside, uncertainty churned wildly. What other forces moved in the shadows? As the murmurs crescendoed once again, Clara stepped beside him, her determination unwavering. "We will not be silenced. We're here together." The crowd echoed her sentiment, but Frank could feel the weight of apprehension linger, ready to drag him down. With the stakes rising and the shadows of doubt swirling, Frank knew he had to prepare for what came next. What truths would he have to confront, and how far would he go to claim the support of this fractured community? Would he emerge renewed, or would he sink beneath a tide of his own past? Frank swallowed hard, holding on to the flickering flame of hope that Clara's words had ignited in the crowd. The tension crackled like static in the air, begging for a shift, for something more than just words. James stood there, arms crossed, a smug look plastered on his face that only amplified Frank's rising frustration. "Don't listen to him," Clara urged the crowd. Her presence radiated strength, a lighthouse in the storm of skepticism. "This isn't just about Frank. This is about all of us finding our way forward." Frank's heart raced. He had to amplify her message, to draw the community closer. This moment was fragile. "Remember why we're here," he shouted, his voice booming above the whispers. "It's not about me. It's about us. Together, we can build a future." He could see faces turning, watching, weighing their options. The man from before, the one who questioned him, stepped forward again. "So you promise to create real change? What if it fails? What if more money disappears into some dream that never comes true?" Frank took a deep breath, fighting off the sting of doubt. "Failure is part of change. I'm not perfect, and I don't have all the answers. But I promise to learn from each step we take. Can we really trust you?" Someone shouted from the back, a young voice filled with apprehension. Another woman joined in, her eyes glistening with tears. "You were never there for us before." Frank felt his heart crack open wider, exposing past regrets along with new resolve. "I know I've let many of you down, but I'm here now. I want to show you that I'm different. We all deserve a chance to share what we have and who we are." Silence filled the space, the weight of emotional honesty landing heavy in the air. He met the eyes of the people, pouring every ounce of sincerity he could muster into each gaze. "Let us not just talk about trust. Let us build it. Together." The murmuring began anew, this time laced with uncertainty and a hint of curiosity. Clara seized the moment, pushing forward. "Let us brainstorm. What do you need? What do you want to see happen here? Your voices are powerful." Frank felt a swell inside him, the kind that dared to hope. He stepped back, letting Clara take the lead while he focused on listening. Bit by bit, hands shot up, questions and ideas erupting from the crowd. "Education," shouted a young man with a hopeful fire. "Job training," another voice chimed in, energized. The more ideas that flowed, the louder the room became, energy pulsing off the walls. Frank stood back in awe, watching as voices transformed into a chorus of possibility. But James remained in the periphery, arms crossed, hate darkening his expression. "I still don't see how this one man, this savior, you've conjured up will change anything. You'll see. They always fall short, and when they do, who will be here for you? Those words hung ominously, like storm clouds ready to burst. Frank felt an icy grip on his chest, the flicker of hope threatened by the shadows of doubt. He glanced at Clara, her firm jaw set, her eyes sparking with defiance. Then let us make sure we lift each other up. When Frank stumbles, we want to leave him behind, she shouted back at James, and the crowd roared. The power of collective spirit began to drown out James's cynicism. But was this strength enough to withstand the storm? Frank could feel the pressure of the moment weighing down on him. Commitment loomed like a promise in the air, but could they all weather the coming challenges? Just as an unexpected cheer erupted, a siren wailed in the distance, cutting through the excitement. The crowd fell silent as they turned to see flashing lights approaching, encircling them like a warning. What now? Frank whispered, his stomach twisting again. Was this rally truly under threat, or was it just the beginning of a struggle that would test every ounce of resolve they had? As the vehicles drew closer, Frank's heart raced. What awaited them in this new chapter of their combined struggle? Would it bind them together, stronger than ever, or fracture the tenuous bonds they had just begun to weave? The sirens grew louder, a cacophony of urgency and dread. Frank felt sweat bead on his brow as he scanned the sea of faces before him, the spark of hope flickering violently like a candle in the wind. Clara stepped closer to him, her presence a reassuring weight against the chaos that threatened to envelop them. Stay calm, she urged, her voice steady. We've got this. Just keep talking. Frank could see the fear in some eyes, parents clutching their children, older folks shifting uncomfortably, young adults mirroring his own apprehension. James, still lurking outside the perimeter, smirked. There was a sickening satisfaction on his face, as if the chaos validated his cynicism. Listen, Frank raised his voice again, pushing through the tension. Whatever happens, we're in this together. We can't let fear silence us. Let us show them that this community won't back down. A murmur rose from the crowd, a hesitant agreement echoing across the space. Just as he felt a small boost of confidence, a police officer stepped forward, the glaring lights of the patrol cars illuminating the faces of the townspeople like a macabre spotlight. What is going on here? The officer's voice cut through the air, firm yet weary. We're having a community meeting. Clara stepped forward, her chin held high. We're discussing ways to improve our neighborhood. The officer's brow furrowed, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Is that so? We've received complaints about a gathering like this without a permit. Frank's heart sank. This is a sign of people wanting to take control of their futures. He shot back, trying to elevate his tone above the sound of uncertainty in the crowd. We aren't doing anything wrong. The officer scanned the group, eyes landing on James, who still stood in the shadows, arms crossed like a self-appointed judge. Are you with him? The officer asked, pointing at James, who simply shrugged, a smirk curling his lips. No, Clara interjected quickly. We're trying to unite, not divide. We believe in change. The weight of Clara's words echoed in Frank's mind. Change. Could they really pull this off? All right, the officer said, his voice softening slightly. Let us keep things orderly. If any more complaints come in, I'll have to disperse the crowd. You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Frank's pulse quickened, but he focused on the faces before him. We can do this. Let us finish what we started. Hands shot up again, determination mixing with the fear. Someone shouted, mental health services. Another called out, affordable housing. Each idea cocooned them in warmth and energy, pushing back against the encroaching doubt. But as the countdown loomed closer, Frank couldn't shake off the sensation of a storm brewing. It felt like the ground beneath them was shaky, like they were standing on a cliff edge. Then, against the backdrop of mounting chants for support, a loud crash came from the street. Everyone turned. A group of protesters marched in, shouting slogans, carrying signs drenched in defiance, their energy palpable and raw. Their fierce determination met the officer's authority head-on. Frank felt a shiver down his spine. The stakes had just been raised. Why don't you get behind that? James taunted from the sidelines, eager to watch the storm he knew was coming. Could this be the spark they needed, or would it shatter the fragile unity they had built? Frank took a step forward, his mind racing. With the clock ticking, the two forces seemed destined to clash. Would they find strength in each other amidst the chaos, or would they fracture under the pressure? As eyes turned toward him for a lifeline, Frank faced the growing tide of change, heart pounding with both fear and a strange thrill. How would he handle it? Would he lead them into a brighter future, or send them spiraling into discord? The moment lay heavy on his shoulders, and the question lingered like a drum roll in the air. Could they truly hold together in the face of a storm they never saw coming? Frank squinted against the pulsating lights as the group of protesters charged forward, a whirlwind of anger and fervor. Their slogans rang out like a battle cry, shaking the very ground beneath his feet. It struck him that this wasn't just a moment, this was a movement. A visceral energy surged through him. He could either wade into the chaos, or he could watch everything he hoped for unravel. "Everyone, listen," he shouted, gripping the edge of the makeshift stage to steady himself. The people around him turned, curiosity flickering in their eyes. The urgency mingled with hope, and Frank leaned into it. "We can't let this become a fight amongst ourselves. Change is possible, but only if we stand together." The murmurs stilled. He searched for the right words, but his heart was racing, trying to match the intensity of the moment. The officers were forming a line, steadfast and intimidating. Frank felt the weight of Clara's supportive presence nearby, grounding him. "Look at us," he implored, voice rising above the tension. "What we're facing isn't just about permits or protests. It's about our voices. It's about community. Yes, things can get messy, but what do we do when we face that mess? We help each other." A flicker of understanding passed through the crowd. It was in their faces, their hope, their fear, their desperation for change. Frank could see it, coiling around them like a live wire. Clara's gentle nod encouraged him. This was it. One woman in the front, arms crossed defiantly, shouted, "We need better schools." Another chimed in, "Health services." Each voice contributed to a swell of ideas and energy. The potent mix was exhilarating. Even from behind the police line, one officer shifted uncomfortably, as if the heat of the crowd was challenging his presence. Suddenly, James stepped out from the shadows, breaking the momentum with his sardonic tone. "What are you really doing, Frank? Leading the sheep to slaughter? That's rich." His smirk made several faces turn in disdain. "James, this isn't about proving anything to you," Frank snapped, frustration seeping through his veins. "This is our chance. You don't have to believe in us, but we believe in each other." For a second, the crowd fell silent, the tension palpable. Frank could almost hear the heartbeat of the community, a collective pulse that matched his own. Yet, behind that courage lay uncertainty. Would they allow fear to silence them? Then, without warning, the protesters erupted in a chant, driving away the lingering doubt. "Unity. Change. We want peace." Their voices curled into the air, bouncing off the walls of the buildings like an echo of their desires. With each chant, Frank felt stronger. He turned back to the officer, who seemed caught between duty and empathy. "You see, we're not here to cause trouble. We are here to stand for a better future. We need your support, not your force." The officer's stance softened, and for a heartbeat, Frank saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Suddenly, everyone was on the edge, waiting for something to tip the scales. Would the officer join them, or would he enforce a separation? Just when Frank thought they were reaching some common ground, a deafening bang erupted from the far side of the street. Panic sparked, people scattered. The moment of unity shattered in an instant. "Stay together," Frank yelled, heart hammering in his chest. He barely registered the crowd's unease as faces shifted from determination to confusion. But amidst the fear, he felt a connection, a whisper of resilience lining the air. Was this the storm they feared, or a new opportunity rising from the ashes? As chaos reigned, Frank realized they could either let it tear them apart or let it bind them tighter. With adrenaline coursing through him, Frank pushed forward. He needed to find a way to bridge that gap, to keep the fire of hope alive. But how could he do that amidst a brewing storm? Questions filled the air, and Frank took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever came next. In that moment, the belief that change was possible thrummed in his veins, and it steered him forward into the unknown. Would they rally together in solidarity, or would fear pull them apart once again? Frank's breath hitched as the bang reverberated through the crowd. Shadows flickered under the dim streetlights, and confusion melted into a tide of panic. It felt like a waking nightmare, where hope slipped through fingers like sand. People knocked into each other, some stumbling, others screaming. The chants faded, replaced by cries of fear. "Clara!" he shouted, scanning the throng for her. He caught a glimpse of her face pale, eyes wide with terror. She was visibly shaken but held onto a hand of the protester beside her, staying grounded amid the chaos. Relief washed over him, knowing she was close. "Stay where you are?" A voice barked. An officer shouted commands, but his words were drowned out by the rising hysteria. Frank's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a protest anymore. This was unraveling into a full-blown crisis. "Focus," he yelled, trying to regain control over the mob. "We can't let fear win. We have to stick together." His voice quivered slightly, but held a thread of determination. He slipped through the throng to reach Clara, who stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, fear gripping her tightly. The officer's line held firm, shields glinting in the light as they prepared for whatever was coming next. Frank could see them tensing, muscles coiling, as if poised to strike. "Clara, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to clasp her shoulders. Her eyes were bright with panic. I don't know what to do," she stammered. "Then let's do this together." He squeezed her arms gently. "We need to rally everyone. We started this fight with unity. Let us not let this fear divide us." Drawing on their shared resilience, he turned back to the crowd. "Listen up," he called again, trying to raise his voice above the clamor. "Yes, there has been an explosion of fear, but we have a chance to show that we can stand together. We need to regroup. Let's south move towards the park across the street back, where we stood in solidarity." Little by little, heads began to turn, eyes slowly focusing on his voice. A few people, emboldened, started to chant again. "Stand together. Stand together." The repetitive chant spread and gained momentum, pulling in the unsure, a bright glimmer against the overwhelming darkness. Frank felt the shift. Here was a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that could grow. They weren't just a group of individuals anymore. This was a community reawakening to itself, hearts synchronizing in that moment, eager for change. He glanced back at the officer, whose brow was furrowed in uncertainty. "Support us," he shouted, crossing the divide between them. "This is about all of us." For a split second, the officer's grip wavered. Frank could see him weighing his options, and that glint of resolve from the crowd now rippling behind him. The police line bristled, but didn't advance. The tension hung thick like fog. "Keep moving," Frank urged, ushering Clara and those around them towards the park. He felt adrenaline tingling through him, his heart pounding in tandem with the fervent chants. The momentum they had ebbed away was slowly trickling back, reshaping itself into something powerful, something they all could become a part of. As they reached the edge of the street that led to the park, a security fence loomed, dividing the protesters from the hope that lay ahead. "We can't stop now," he shouted. "This is just a hurdle. We can leap over it. Together." The crowd surged forward, voices blending in harmony, brushing against the police presence like the wings of a swarm. Frank's eyes danced across the faces, often filled with fear, but now glinting with resolve. They were more than scared individuals. They were part of a larger story, one that was still being written. But suddenly, above the voices, a loudspeaker blared, drowning out their chants. "Return home immediately. You are violating the law." The message cut through the air like a knife. Frank's heart sank. Would this be the moment that would break them again? Would the call of fear and authority drown out their creativity and desires? A tight knot of worry formed in his chest as he turned back to the crowd, ready to push forward. What would he say to inspire them again? As the officer stepped closer, hand resting on his baton, Frank had one thought echoing in his mind. Was this the moment that would define them, or would they rise once more, reaching for unity? The crowd faltered for a moment, their chants faltering in the face of the officer's command. Voices lowered, uncertainty flickered across the faces of the brave souls who had gathered, believing in the strength they found in one another. Frank felt the weight of their gaze, each eye resting on him for guidance. Would he falter now? With a deep breath, he raised his voice again, more fiercely this time. "They want us to let fear tear us apart. But look at us." Frank gestured to the people standing shoulder to shoulder, strangers not long ago, now united in a cause greater than themselves. We are more than this moment. We are more than fear. The murmurs began again, tentative but building into a swell. He spotted Clara just beyond the front lines, her face flushed, that glimmer of courage returning. He could feel her energy, her belief sparking life back into those around them. "Remember why we're here," Frank shouted, willing them to focus on the reason they had gathered in the first place. "We're fighting for our rights, for our voices to be heard. No one can take that from us if we stay strong and united." The sound of his voice rang clear over the crackling tension, and one by one, others began to respond. Together, together. The chant built again, a resounding wave cresting over the fear that had threatened to swallow them whole. The officer hesitated, his breath hitching as he watched the scene unfold. Frank could see the conflict in his eyes, a flicker of doubt about the orders he had received. It was a defining moment, and Frank knew it. "Stand with us," Frank called. "You, too, have the power to change things. We are all human beneath these uniforms and helmets. We are all in this together." At his words, a gasp rippled through the crowd. Was it too much to hope for? But then a young officer from the back stepped forward, eyes wide and uncertain, struggling with the weight of the moment. He glanced from his comrades to the crowd, and then something shifted. He lifted his shield, lowering it slightly. Behind Frank, Clara's hand suddenly found his. A small squeeze, a reminder of their bond, reminding him that they were resilient together. It reignited a fire inside him. They needed to push forward, not away. "Let us show them what a united front looks like." With that, Frank stepped forward and grabbed the edge of the fence, pulling it slightly. "If you believe in our cause, help us cross over. Help us claim what is rightfully ours." Like a magnet, the crowd responded, surging forward towards him. The fence was soon rattled, with hands reaching out, voices screaming in solidarity. "Frank! Frank!" It blew over him like a warm wave, a fierce passion igniting in every heart present. But the moment was short-lived. The loudspeaker crackled again, this time insisting on a swift response. More officers moved in, their stance resolute, ready to confront the tide that was building. "Stay back," a voice shouted, deeper, more fearsome. Frank's heart raced. Would chaos return and unravel everything they had just built? "Together," Frank shouted one last time as he braced himself. "We can't let them drown our voices." The fence shook with force as they pressed on, and he felt the collective energy pulsate through him. It was time to make a stand. He looked back at Clara, seeing her determination mimic his own, and his heart surged with hope. But then, above the chaos, a strange silence fell. The air shifted, thick and heavy, like a storm gathering. What was coming next? Would they break through the division, or would they stumble under the weight of their fears once more? With his heart pounding, Frank stood poised for the next chapter of their fight. Would they finally cross the line and unite? Or was this all just a fleeting moment of bravery? The tension hung heavy in the air, a silent scream waiting to erupt. Just as Frank felt the tide of hope swelling around him, the officer's harsh voice broke through once more, echoing like a familiar threat, urging them to back down. But within the gathering crowd, hearts beat stronger, driven by a collective yearning for something more than fear. Together, the chant rippled through the masses like electricity. Frank could see the flashes of determination igniting each face, lighting them from within. More than just a movement, this was a dawning realization they were not merely individuals, but a community with shared dreams and struggles. They were tired of being sidelined, of waiting for change to trickle down. This was their moment. "Hold on," Frank called to the front. "Change doesn't come from fear, but from understanding. We are all in this for something bigger. We are fighting for our families, for our children, for justice. Together, nothing can break us." His voice trembled, but it was a tremor of passionate resolve. Every word carried the weight of every sob, every struggle, every moment they had faced. The crowd's fear began to shift into courage, hands tightening into fists and voices rising like wildfire. Frank turned to Clara, her eyes alight with unwavering faith. "Let us do this," he said, feeling the charge of her spirit alongside his own. She nodded, squeezing his hand reassuringly, a silent vow that they would face whatever lay ahead together. Then, just as the energy surged toward a breaking point, the young officer shifted again. He looked torn between his duty and the fervor surging before him. The older officer stepped closer, face taut. "Step back, or we'll impose order," he warned, but the fervor radiating from the crowd grew. "We want a voice. We want justice." A voice rang out, prompting cheers from the crowd that echoed against the concrete jungle. The officer's resolve faltered. Frank recognized that feeling. It was the doubt that gnawed at his own heart. Yet, something remarkable was happening. Fear was beginning to meld into clarity. "What are we fighting for?" Frank pressed on. "Our safety, our rights to be treated as equals. No more simply waiting for change. It starts right here, right now." A murmur rippled through the officers as they exchanged glances, surging uncertainty battling against orders like waves against a seawall. Frank seized the moment. "This isn't just about community. This is about trust. We trust you as our protectors. Help us bridge this gap." The young officer, hot with uncertainty, stepped forward, catching the eye of his commanding officer hesitantly. Maybe we can find another way," he suggested. It was tentative, but it was a crack in the armor. The crowd quieted, leaning forward, hope sparkling in their eyes. Clara took a step toward the line, arms wide open, an invitation rather than a confrontation. "If we unite, we all get better. It's not about winning or losing. It's about moving forward for all of us," she reminded. The tension broke as the commanding officer took a breath, something shifting in his expression. There came a softer acknowledgement mixed with authority, a sign of openness. "Perhaps we can discuss what this looks like?" He relented, his voice cracking slightly as humility spilled into the air. Frank's heart lifted. This was an opening they could build on. "Yes," he shot back, excitement pouring forth. "Let us sit down. We need to hear each other. We need to understand each other." Clara looked back at Frank, her eyes wide with hope. That beacon of resolve shimmered within them both as they approached the officers, fresh intentions blooming in the distance. Their hands pulled back from raised fists. The officers and the community together saw the truth. The strength didn't rest in confrontation, but in bridging divides. Frank felt warmth rising in his chest, igniting the embers of unfulfilled dreams into passionate flames. "Together, let us forge a path that leads not just to dialogue, but toward action. It's time we all rebuild what was lost." The cry of together swelled, one voice leading into a beautiful chorus. And in that chorus, realized potential glimmered like a new dawn breaking through the darkness. They huddled close, emotions clashing and mingling. They began outlining their demands. Timothy, the hesitant officer, now eagerly listening. Each voice added depth, layered histories of resilience, articulating the urgent need for change. In that moment of united hope, Frank recognized Clara's determined gaze. Across that echoed space, he saw a future blooming, a future defined not by the wealth he once accumulated, but by the ties he now forged. What once seemed like countless barriers transformed into bridges, each brick made of compassion, understanding, and shared dreams. Could this spark ignite something bigger? As the gathering faded under the radiant glow of unity, Frank felt a profound transformation within himself. No longer trapped within his penthouse, he found purpose in humanity, in rebuilding, in standing side by side with Clara and these vibrant souls now sharing a narrative woven deeply together. The old narrative was fading, and a new story was beginning. "Let us keep this momentum," Clara exclaimed, inspiration fluttering in her voice. "Let us take the first steps toward real change." And united under a banner of hope, voices ready for action, Frank understood. They could, finally and truly, make a difference. This was their transformation, a collective leap of faith into the light, for a better tomorrow. Now, remember, this is the moment you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this story with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation and stand together. You need to support this journey. Don't wait, not even one more second.